This is my favorite thing to paint ever. If you're into drawing and painting characters like I am, chances are your favorite thing to paint are the eyes. There is just something so satisfying about painting expressive, soulful eyes, and nothing quite compares to the feeling of painting eyes and then instantly watching the character come alive. Now, there's a million tutorials out there about how to draw and paint eyes from scratch. So I'm not going to tell you the same things over and over again because let's face it, you already know it. So today we're going to look at the little details, the subtle nuances that artists use when painting eyes that make the character look alive. As always, if you do enjoy this video and find it helpful, then please remember to give me a big thumbs up, hit that subscribe button down below, maybe check out my Patreon. But now let's look at my 3 crucial steps to painting life into eyes. Come sit down, puppy. Come sit. Sit. I know. Okay, good boy. Okay, good boy. So I've arranged these steps in the order that I do them, and while your process might be different, these are tips you can incorporate at any stage of the painting. And like I said, there's loads of tutorials that will walk you through the exact process of sketching out the eye, the anatomy of it, how to render lashes, etc. So just to avoid telling you stuff that you've already heard elsewhere, today we're going to start with already painted eyes that you're watching me paint right now. These are pretty early stage, and in my workflow, this is about the stage just after value rendering, where we're starting to throw in some color. Bear in mind, I often work across the entire painting, gradually rendering all parts out to the same level before I move on to adding more details. So this is just a condensed version of my actual workflow. Just thought I'd throw that out there, you don't have to worry about how long it's taking you to paint a whole character. This is a shorter, narrower focused version of an actual character painting. Okay, enough bants, let's dive in. First thing I always do when painting eyes is to really push the eye into the socket. And this took me embarrassingly long to figure out, so I'm telling you now to save you the embarrassment. We know the anatomy of the skull. We know that eyeballs lie inside the hollow eye socket, and it is the edges of the socket that create the eyebrow and the top of the cheekbone. Feel around your eyeball and you'll find the edges of your eye socket. Now, although the eyeball itself bulges out a little, the edges of the socket itself cause the skin of the brow to protrude and create a hood over the eye. But here's the thing, for the longest time, I hated painting shadows around the eyes, trying to make them appear brighter. What I didn't realize was that this reluctance to paint darker bits in the eye socket was actually causing the eye to appear very flat and lifeless. In my bid to not make the characters look tired, I was instead making them look dull. So here's what we're gonna do first. We're gonna grab a shadow tone, never go fully black, I usually go for a very dark high saturation brown. The eyes and nose are very well supplied with blood, so they generally appear rather saturated or slightly reddish. So never go fully black or dark grey because that will flatten the colours. So we're gonna grab a dark saturated brown and we're gonna gently push it into the inner edge of the eye socket, right by where the brow meets the bridge of the nose. Keep in mind the anatomy of the eye, because this isn't just a full-on hole, it is a slight dip in the surface of the skin, which is then pushed back out by the eyeball as you move further away from the center of the face. So make sure that you blend it smoothly into the brow ridge. The upper eyelid, however, will start to push out through this darkness, so make sure you don't extend this hollow too far into the eyelid itself. We're gonna repeat this process under the eye, though it is a little different here. First of all, because the under eye area isn't quite as hooded by the brow bone, the shadow isn't gonna be as dark. Bear in mind, we're thinking of fairly flat lighting from above the model. In stuff like horror lighting, this will probably work differently, but for our purposes, the under eye shadow isn't going to be quite as intense as the shadow by the nose. So we're going to grab a value that is only a few tones darker than the skin, and we're going to go a little more blue or purple with it, because dark circles, right? And now we're going to find the eye socket again, this time just below and lateral to the inner tear duct area. Again, remember that this is a lot more subtle, and the lower eyelid will once again bulge through the skin under the eye. So this will be fairly localized and form an almost inverted comma of darkness under the eye. Make sure to blend well unless you're going for a particularly gaunt character. So here's a before and after for this step, and you can see how much of a difference that makes already. Now that we have that in place, let's dive into some of the more fun, exciting bits. I like to call this step the Ring of Fire because A, best game ever, but B, we're gonna work on the ring of color in the iris or the colored part of the eyeball. So here, as you can tell, I have a flat dark circle where the iris should go. I always suggest preserving the line art if you're new to painting eyes, because that'll tell you where the pupil goes. But if you're like me and just at a point where you trust the painting to lead you where it will, we're gonna start with just a flat circle. Here, I think I'm gonna give her green eyes. So the first thing I'll do is grab a greenish brown that's a few tones lighter than our circle that we've already painted in. I'm now creating a ring inside the edges of the iris. The reason we're going for a ring is because the musculature of the iris, right? The pupil, which is the black hole in the center of the iris, is literally a hole, right? And the colorful bits you see are actually stained muscles. And these muscles go across from the outer edge of the iris to the inside edge around the pupil, kind of like spokes on a bike's wheel. So you'll find that the attachment and insertion points of these radial muscles are generally a little darker than the belly of the muscle, because the belly of the muscle protrudes out a little, while the edges sink in. By painting a ring, we're really pushing this difference in tone. Next, I'm gonna go ahead and grab a paler, more saturated green tone and lower the brush size a little. I'm then gonna go through and paint a ring in the center of the ring that we just painted. And then we're gonna grab an even paler tone, lower the brush size some more, and add another thinner ring inside this one. And this is why I call it the Ring of Fire, because the center of the ring is light and highly saturated, while the outer and inner edges are darker, kind of like you see in a fire. And just to push the realism, we're gonna grab a shadow tone from the iris and add little radial lines that go partially or completely across the Ring of Fire. You can also repeat this with the highlight tone from the iris just to add more interest. Remember, however, that the upper edge of the iris will be hooded by the eyelid, so always go back in and add a bit of shadow just at the upper edge and soften it down onto the rest of the iris. So here's the before and after for step 2. This final step is what makes the eyes really pop. It is always my absolute favorite step of painting a face because it is so simple and so quick. We're gonna grab a very light high saturation tone and throw in some specular highlights. However, there is a technique to this. First off, you want to grab a hard-edged opaque brush. A line art type of brush is perfect here because you don't want all of the edges to be soft, nor do you want any transparency. Now, the color you choose depends on your environment and color palette. Here the skin is fairly warm, so I'm gonna go ahead and pick a very pale blue. And when it comes to specular highlights in the eye, I generally go for the rule of 3. The first biggest specular highlight we're going to place is at the upper edge of the pupil inside the iris. The pupil is where the light enters the eye, so it makes sense that this is the area of maximum light reflection. The second specular highlight I usually place is a horizontal broken line that goes across the outer edge of the iris into the white of the eye. I usually put this on the opposite side as the first specular highlight we just placed, just so everything is balanced. And the third one you want to place is in the wettest part of the eye, which is the inner pink tear duct area. I like to place a couple of spots here just to really push the glossiness, because remember, the more specular highlights there are, the glossier or wetter the surface appears. If you want to show that the eye is welling up, you can push this a step further and create a line of gloss by the lower waterline of the eye. This is what I did with the cancer painting where I wanted to show her crying. So specular highlights before and after. Magical, hey? And there we go. That's my 3 quintessential steps to painting life into eyes. As always, I hope you've enjoyed this video and found it helpful. And if you have, then please remember to give me a big thumbs up, hit that subscribe button down below, comment below letting me know what you think of this tutorial and if there are any other tutorials you'd like to see on this channel. I have some personal art and the second super in-depth 2-hour-long tutorial video over on my Patreon. So if that's something you're into, check that out as well. The link is in the video description. And with all of that said, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you guys have enjoyed it as much as I have. Check out some more videos up here and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye!